Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kennedy. Oh my gosh, I don't know why. It sounds weird when I say my own name. But for today's video, I'm going to be doing my wrap up, basically talking about every book I've read so far this year. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. I had a very great start to the reading year, and it kind of went downhill in terms of quantity read, but I have been reading some really good books this year. So yeah, I've read 27 books this year, most of which I read in January. But yeah, I'm just gonna talk about all of those. And yeah, the reason for the lack of reading in the later months is because honestly, school and stress. But I'm honestly not going to beat myself up over that. I'm still reading more than the average person. So I'm going to dive on into the books just because there are quite a few to get through in one video. And I'm going to try and go mostly in order. There are some that I'm just going to clump together because they are in the same series. But yeah, let's just get started. So the first book I read was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Now, I did mention this in my book haul, but this is a beautiful, beautiful romance story following two main characters who got married and had kids, and then their marriage hits some bumps in the road and they separate. And it's actually them trying to move on from this marriage, but then they realize that they're still meant to be together. They just have to work through their issues first. And it's just so beautiful. It's just, the characters felt so real because a lot of the things that they do and say are not perfect. They mess up, they say mean things sometimes that they don't necessarily mean, but it just comes out because of the heat of the moment, and it just seems so real. And I loved this book. It made me tear up. I'd honestly give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I would round it up to 5 probably on Goodreads. I think that might have been what I did, just because it deserves it. The writing is beautiful. It makes me want to read more books by this author, and yeah, I don't know, I just really loved this story. I will say, trigger warnings for stillbirth and miscarriages and just overall problems with conception and delivery and all of that, because that is very, very prevalent in this story. So if those are some topics that you're sensitive to, I would maybe skip this book, or at least skip the parts that it talks about it, because it can get pretty in detail. So I would honestly, if it's gonna hurt you, I would just maybe pass on this book. But I have heard that Kennedy Ryan's other books are really good. So okay, so then I read these next 4 books consecutively, and that is the Eden series by Daphne Perry. I read the first 4 books, well, 3.5. So it starts off with this book I read first. It's the prequel novella, which follows a main character who needs a bodyguard because her mother was, I believe, murdered. So now her rich father like hires a bodyguard, and it's her romance with this bodyguard. And it was very steamy, very cute. I really enjoyed it. 4.5 stars as well. Yeah, I loved this, and it sparked me to pick up the rest of the books that were currently out at the time. So I have Indigo Ridge, which follows our main character who just moved to this town, and she is the new sheriff in town, and a lot of people underestimate her because she is a woman. And it's about her trying to prove her worth as the sheriff despite her gender and age and everything, because she is also very young, so people just doubt her very much. And it's about her overcoming that and proving that she is in fact a worthy sheriff, and that people need to stop assuming that people can only be one thing, and like a sheriff can only be like a middle-aged white man. Like, no, like, you know, there's no set person that can do a certain job. So it's about that, which I really appreciated, because it's not only or just because it's very feminist, but it does also have a romance and a really good suspense element. The suspense element was probably my favorite part of this because our main character is trying to figure out if there is more going on in this town, because there has been a pattern of suicides the past like 7 years, I think it is, and it's a very small town, so that is a lot for this small town, and everyone in the town is saying like, oh, they're just suicides, like there's no need for an investigation, but she's like, no, there's something else going on. There might be like a murder or just something else has to be going on for this amount of suicides in such a short time. And so it's about her doing that along with a really cute romance with a guy who's like a cowboy. I just really enjoyed this book. It's I don't know, it's so good. I feel like this book is honestly underrated in the series. So many people think it's like the worst book in the series, but for me, I literally cannot choose like a least favorite from the books I've read so far, because they're just all so good. And if you couldn't tell, I did give that book 5 stars. And then I have Juniper Hill, which is the second official book in the series, which follows our main character who is running away. She has a newborn baby and she has nowhere to live, and so she ends up living with this grumpy guy in the middle of nowhere. Not in the middle of nowhere, but he has like this secluded house and he doesn't want to be bothered by anyone, including our main character Memphis, but he ends up letting her stay with him because he feels guilty if he like, you know, doesn't take in this woman who has a child. So it's their romance. It's very, very cute. The main guy is a chef, and I don't know why, I just love that trope. And it's a single parent romance. It's so cute. Again, I gave this 5 stars. So freaking cute. And then I read Garnet Flats by Demi Perry, which is again the 3rd official book in the series. And this one follows our main character who had this boyfriend when she was younger, and he one day just left and married her best friend with like barely any warning and like no knowledge of like why this happened. He was just like, well, I'm in love with your best friend and I'm gonna marry her, and they ran away together, or what, so it seems. And obviously that left our main character pretty upset and traumatized. And then one day the guy Foster comes back and he wants her back, and he explains the situation. He tries to grovel. It's a very heartbreaking book. I'd say this is probably one of the darker books in the series. I do think that the author did a good job of groveling for the hero. I know a lot of people say he could have done more, which I obviously get. He did a pretty bad thing of just like literally leaving her with no explanation, but for a book, I thought it was really good. 5 stars. Okay, so the next book that I read was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata, which is a chunky boy. I listened to this one on audio, and I'm sad to say I only gave this book like 3 stars. I love Mariana Zapata, and I honestly was just like underwhelmed by this book. I already forgot like basically everything that happened. I feel like I need to give this book a second chance. Like maybe it was just my mood, because I really feel like I would like this, but again, I don't even like remember this book. I thought it was very forgettable. I don't know if I was just going through a period of time where I wasn't absorbing the book, which was definitely possible, but I don't know. I just feel like it didn't have to be this long. I feel like I was zoning out through most of it, and yeah. So I don't know, that might have been my fault for my enjoyment level of this book. Like maybe I do need to give it a second chance, but for now I'd say I'd give it like a 3-star rating. Like I just personally thought that this was kind of disappointing, especially since the other books that I've read by her I've absolutely loved. So I feel like this one just kind of, again, like just didn't hit the mark for me. Okay, now these next 2 books I'm so excited to talk about. The first one is Give Me More by Sarah Kate, which is a poly romance. It's about a married couple who decide like maybe to spice things up, and they invite their best friend to join them. And this is the third book in the Salacious Players Club series, which is a series about these men and women that come together to basically create a club for things that I feel like I can't explicitly mention because I don't know, like, I'm sure you can guess what kind of club it is based on my reaction. But this book was really good. I think I gave this one 4 stars. It's not my favorite in the series, but it was a very, very sweet romance. Sarah Kate did a really good job at really making it polyamorous and like making it so you feel the connection between all of the characters. So I really liked this, and it was a very fun time. As I read that, I wanted to immediately dive into the final book that was out in the series at the time. Again, now I'm behind. But that is Mercy by Sarah Kate. Holy crap. This is definitely one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. 5 stars. This is a younger man, older woman romance. It's got dom sub, but female dom. Oh my gosh, this book was so... If there is one book that has ever made me blush, it would be this one. Like, it was something else, I'll tell you that. It was a very fun time. I loved the dynamic between the characters. I loved the characters themselves. Highly recommend this series. It's one of the best steamy romance series I've read in a long time. And the new book came out recently, The Highest Bidder, and I really need to buy that and read it. It's such a good series. 5 stars, if you couldn't tell by my reaction. Even just thinking about this book makes me blush, and I love it. So next, this is the one instance where I said that I was just going to lump these all together instead of talking about them all individually, because that would take forever. And that is Blue Flag. I read the entirety of this, so all 8 volumes. I loved the series. It was so much fun. It's a manga series following this group of friends, and it's like a romance kind of series. Like, it's about this one girl trying to get the attention of this one guy, but then you realize that there's way more to it than that. And I feel like you just have to go into this series not knowing much and just go for the ride. Like, I don't know, it's very good. I think overall I'd give the series like a 4 out of 5 stars. The first few volumes were like absolute 5 stars, and then I feel like in the middle there were a couple that just kind of lost my interest a little bit and were more like 3.5 stars. So, but then like the last volume was like 5 stars. So I don't know, I think general, or like as an average for my ratings across the series, it would be like a 4-star rating. But I would highly recommend it if you like manga, and if you specifically like more slice of life with slight romance vibes manga. Okay, so the next book that I read was Credence by Penelope Douglas. This is one of the most like hyped books, at least during like, I'd say like quarantine time. People read this book, and don't get me wrong, I can definitely see the hype. I freaking love Penelope Douglas's books. Like, I have a little mini collection right there of all my books that I own by her, and I love her books. She's a very good romance writer, especially when it comes to like steamy romances. But for this one, I just personally think that this was a case where it wasn't my thing. Not that this is polyamorous, but I typically have a hard time with books that have more than one partner. And this book is about our main character who basically like lives with her uncle and his 2 sons, and it's like her romance with all of them, but she does pick one in the end. But I personally just like, I did not feel the connection between like any of them. I don't know, I think this, I don't know. It kind of made me sad that I didn't connect to this book. I again think that this might have just been a me problem because I remember loving it. Like I started this book like 2 years ago and I really liked it. And so I bought the physical copy and then I fell into a reading slump and never finished it. And then this year I decided I'm gonna restart it and read it, and I just like couldn't get connected to it. So I think it was just like, again, a me problem. I don't know. I love Penelope Douglas's books, and don't get me wrong, this was like a fun time. I just really could not fall into it. So it was more like, I feel like, my mental state at the time. So then I have Flow by Kennedy Ryan, which is a prequel novella to a series by her. I thought that this was, okay, sorry, I accidentally kicked my tripod. I thought that this book was really cute. It's a good start to the series. I do remember there was quite a cliffhanger at the end, but I already forgot what the cliffhanger was. So honestly, I might have to go back and like skim read this as a refresher if I am going to continue the series. I did give this little novella 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars just because it is a novella, so I feel like I could have used more development with some of it. But I thought it was cute. Again, loved Kennedy Ryan's writing style. So, yeah. Alright, next up I read Waking Olivia, and this is a book about a runner, and she has a problem where she like runs in her sleep. She's a competitive runner, and so when she's very anxious, she runs in her sleep, and then the next day when she has a running competition, she can't do very well because she's already burned out all of her energy from running in her sleep. And it's about her trying to overcome this, and she has like a new coach, and it's her romance with her coach. But they're like, it's like an older romance, like she's already in college and everything, so it's not super taboo in my opinion when it comes to coach athlete romances. I feel like this one's pretty tame, like they're pretty close in age, so yeah. But I thought the romance was really cute. I do again feel like I loved the beginning and then kind of lost some interest in the middle, but then the ending was cute too. So I don't know, I think I'd give this book about a 4-star rating. It was decent. And I'd recommend it, but I don't see myself possibly like rereading it in the future, if that makes sense. So yeah. And then the next 2 books, I honestly don't remember. Like, I remember reading them, but I don't really remember like anything about them, which just shows like I didn't really enjoy them that much. And that is Beautifully Broken Pieces and Beautifully Broken Life by Catherine Cowles. I do know that this series is known for being like one of her worst series, or like not a good representation of like her capabilities, so I recognize that. But I wanted to start with like her lesser appreciated series, so then I'm like blown away by her really, really good books, if that makes sense. But I think I did make a mistake with that. Or not a mistake. I gave Beautifully Broken Pieces 3 stars. That one I like really don't remember anything about. Like I feel like I was just kind of annoyed with the whole book. Like I was just bored basically. And then Beautifully Broken Life, I did enjoy more. I gave it 4 stars originally, but since I can't remember it very well, I'd honestly probably drop that to a 3 or 3.5 star rating. Again, it was just very forgettable. I wanted to read her books because a lot of people said if you like Devney Perry, you would like Catherine Cowles, but I do think I will just go into one of Catherine Cowles' more loved series instead of continuing on with this one for now. And then we have a slight shift, and that is with Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. I freaking love this book. It's so good. It's such a unique fantasy book. I know I took a little turn, got away from romance, and got into some fantasy books, which is going to carry on to the rest of the books of this wrap-up. But this book was so good. It follows our main character, Senlin. Well, technically his name is Thomas Senlin, but he basically just goes by Senlin, who has always studied and been fascinated by this tower called the Tower of Babel. And so he gets married to his new wife, obviously, and then for their honeymoon, they decide to go to this tower, since it's always been Sunlin's dream to visit this tower. But then they realize there are some rules that you have to follow in order to basically successfully make it into this tower and make it out. And one of those rules is to never let your partner out of your sight. Like, the person you go with, stay with them and do not lose sight of them, because you will lose them. And Sunlin is kind of like, I won't lose my wife, kind of thing. And so she asks to go into the shop, and he doesn't want to go into the shop, so he's like, okay, go, I'll be right here, just meet me outside of this shop, and then we'll continue on our trek together. Well, as you could probably imagine, they do in fact lose each other, because this tower is constantly kind of shifting and changing, and it's just a very mysterious, whimsical tower. And so this book is about him trying to find his wife, but he's going through like the different levels of the tower. And each tower has its own different like laws, own different feeling to it. Did I see each level of the tower? It's just a very unique book. I absolutely loved it. I read it basically like all in a day. And I gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. I loved it. Then next I read Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, another hit for me. I gave this book 5 stars. This is a pastoral fantasy about a world where there are these elven creatures that are seen as gods because they're like almost invincible, and then there's like the regular humans. They consider these elves gods because they are supposedly not able to be killed, but in the very beginning, our main character kills said unkillable creature. I moved my tripod on accident again, sorry. And this causes a lot of conflict between the elves and the humans, and there's so many different parts to this book, but it's so amazing. If you like fantasy books, I'd highly recommend this, especially if you like very atmospheric, whimsical books, like for like dark foresty vibes. I would recommend this book. It was so good. I can't wait to continue the series. I haven't yet, but I will one day. And then next I read Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, which I absolutely adored as well. I gave this one like 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's 3 different perspectives. One is a woman who has a child, and the child is actually like taken, and it's her trying to get to her child, and it just shows like what she's willing to do for her child, which is amazing. But then there's another character who is trying to work her ranks, or work her way up in the ranking of her group. And then I forgot the other guy's perspective. I know he was like hiding from something, and then he like found his group of people. I don't know. It was very slower paced. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say again that it was like a full 5 stars. The ending was amazing, but I do think that the pacing, like, it was a fast-paced book, but it felt slow at the same time. I don't know. I liked it though. It was very atmospheric again, and I really liked specifically Orca's point of view, who is the mother looking for her son. It was very heartbreaking, but it was also very, very interesting. So yeah, again, I'd give that like a 4.5 stars. Okay, so the next book I completed was Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, which I absolutely adored. I gave this one 5 stars. And this was like exactly what I needed in the moment. It's about our main character, whose name is Dora. I knew it was like a unique name. Her name is Dora, and she is playing in the woods one day as a child when she comes across this elf, and he basically says that her mother sold her daughter's soul to this elf. So he comes to collect her soul, is not successful, and only takes half of it. So it's about our main character in this fantasy world trying to kind of navigate that, only having half a soul. What I would compare it to is like, it's like someone having a disability in a fantastical world. So I thought that that was very well done. I will say there's like one part of the ending that really bothered me, but I still gave this book 5 stars because I loved it that much. But if you want to know more in-depth thoughts, let me know and I can tell you exactly what bothered me. But yeah, it also has a romance with this really cool, like, magical guy, Lord Sorcier or Sorcier. I just want to say Sorcier, but then I feel like I'm being too fancy with that. But anyway, it's her romance with him and how he will love, or how he loves her even with her only having half a soul. And he's like, if you had a whole soul, like, the world couldn't handle that. That's why you, I don't know. Some of the quotes in this that he says are so cute, and I loved this book so, so, so much. Then I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, another one of my favorite books of the year so far. This is about our main character, Emily Wilde, who travels to this town to gather research on fairies because she writes books about fairies. She is like an expert on the fae, but she goes to this one town to kind of learn more about this lesser known type of fairy, and it's just about her journey in doing that. And it's also about how her coworker comes to help her even though he's like aggravating, and she has suspicions that he himself might be a fae. And it's very funny, it's very cute, there's a romantic element to this. Oh, so good. This is one of the most atmospheric books I've read in a while, so I would highly recommend that if you're looking for a very whimsical, again, like cottagecore type of book. The final book that I've read so far this year is Wayward by Amelia Hart. This is a tri-perspective book, so it has 3 different perspectives. One is in the 1600s, one is, I believe, the 1900s, and one is 2019. And it's just, oh, I don't even know how to describe this book. It's about these women who have these magical powers. Power sounds like too strong of a word, but they have these magical abilities. And obviously the one during the 1600s, it causes her some problems because that's like during the time of like the Salem witch trials and things like that. So she's like accused, she's on trial. And then the 1900s perspective, the girl is cast away from her family for like bad acts, even though what she did was out of her, or what she did was out of her control. And then our modern day perspective is about this girl who inherits a cottage from her great aunt, or from her aunt or great aunt. And she runs away to this cottage away from her abusive boyfriend, so, or husband. I think it might be her husband. It just says abusive partner. But yeah, so this is a very hard book to read at times. Each perspective has its own case of abuse, so definitely a trigger warning for that. And it's just a very feminist novel. I loved the female empowerment in this, and also the generational element to it and how they're all connected. And I don't know, it's just such a beautiful book inside and outside, and I would highly recommend it. I feel like not enough people have read this book. I know it's a new release, but I still feel like more people should read this book. It's so beautiful, and I would give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Those are all of the books I've read so far this year. I honestly probably should have read more, but that's okay. I don't want to put too much pressure on myself to read when I don't feel like it, especially with school going on. But now that I'm on summer break, I am hoping to read more. I'm very excited for everything I can hopefully read this summer. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all hopefully in my next video. Bye!